There is a form of decline that almost nobody fears early enough because it does not begin with a dramatic diagnosis. It begins quietly. It begins when carrying grocery bags feels heavier than it used to, when climbing stairs turns into a negotiation with your own body, when standing up from the floor stops being automatic, when a small illness takes longer to recover from, when a fall that should have been embarrassing becomes life-changing. Most people think aging steals life in a single moment. In reality, aging often steals life in inches, and one of the biggest reasons is not just disease. It is the slow erosion of muscle, strength, healing capacity, metabolic resilience, and physical independence. Right at the center of that story is something most people still treat like a gym topic instead of a medical topic: protein. I'm Dr. William Lee, and today I want to explain why protein may be one of the most underrated tools in all of medicine. Not because it is trendy, not because it is a magic nutrient, and not because more is always better, but because when you understand what protein is actually doing inside the human body, you realize it is not just about building muscle for appearance. It is about preserving the machinery that lets you live well, recover well, think clearly, stay mobile, stay independent, regulate appetite, maintain blood sugar, heal after injury, and hold on to the physical reserve that protects you when life hits hard. Protein is not a supplement category. Protein is structure. Protein is function. Protein is repair. Protein is signaling. Your muscles are built from it. Your skin depends on it. Your enzymes are made from it. Many hormones rely on it. Your immune defenses use it. Antibodies are proteins. Transport molecules are proteins. The tissues that let you move, heal, adapt, and survive are constantly being broken down and rebuilt. That rebuilding never stops. Every day, every hour, every minute, your body is spending protein and replacing protein. And if your diet does not bring enough of the right amino acids back in, your body does not politely wait. It borrows. It takes from tissue that can be sacrificed in the short term to protect what matters most in the moment. That is why muscle matters so much more than most people realize. Muscle is not cosmetic reserve. It is metabolic reserve. It is emergency reserve. It is glucose disposal capacity. It is balance. It is power. It is the difference between stumbling and catching yourself or stumbling and breaking a hip. It is the difference between getting pneumonia and recovering or getting pneumonia and never quite coming back. It is the difference between needing help with daily living and remaining the person who can still open jars, lift luggage, walk long hauls, and stand up without assistance. This is exactly why age-related muscle loss, known as sarcopenia, matters clinically. Cleveland Clinic describes sarcopenia as the progressive loss of muscle mass, strength, and function that comes with aging, and the consequences are not trivial. Weakness, slower movement, instability, more falls, less independence, more vulnerability. The National Institute on Aging has emphasized that mobility limitations in older adults are linked to higher rates of falls, chronic disease, nursing home admission, and even mortality. In other words, when you lose strength, you do not just lose performance, you lose protection. Now here is the uncomfortable part. This process starts much earlier than most people think. The body does not wait until old age to begin drifting downward. Researchers and clinical educators have pointed out that muscle mass can begin declining in adulthood decades before most people pay attention. UCLA Health notes that muscle mass can decline from around age 30 and that the pace accelerates later in life. Harvard Health has warned that adults who do not engage in regular strength training can lose several pounds of muscle per decade. The body can seem fine for years while quietly becoming less prepared for stress. That is the danger. The loss is silent while the compensation is still good. For a long time, public conversation about health has focused almost entirely on disease after the disease appears. High blood sugar gets a medication, high blood pressure gets a medication, joint pain gets a medication, poor sleep gets a medication, low mood gets a medication, acid reflux from other medications gets another medication. But before many people ever arrive at that long list of prescriptions, there is often a long story unfolding underneath it. Less muscle, less activity, worse insulin sensitivity, more fatigue, more weight gain, more inflammation, more instability, more dependence. Protein alone does not solve all of that. But chronically undereating protein, especially while doing little resistance exercise, absolutely pushes the body in the wrong direction. To see why, you have to understand one major biological reality of aging. Older muscle does not respond to food the way younger muscle does. Scientists call this anabolic resistance. It means the signal to build and repair muscle becomes weaker with age unless the stimulus is strong enough. So the same small serving of protein that may have been adequate in your 20s may not create the same muscle building response in your 60s or 70s. This is one reason expert groups in aging nutrition have recommended protein intakes above the basic minimum for older adults. A major expert paper in clinical nutrition recommended at least 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day for healthy older adults, and even more for older adults dealing with illness or malnutrition risk. Other researchers studying optimal aging, including Stuart Phillips and colleagues, have argued that higher intakes may better support muscle retention, especially when physical activity is included. That distinction matters because the standard recommended allowance that most people hear about was never designed to maximize robust aging. It was designed to prevent frank deficiency in generally healthy adults. That is a floor, not a ceiling. It is a minimum survival threshold, not a prescription for strength, resilience, and healthy longevity. If you treat the minimum as the ideal, you create a dangerous illusion. You can avoid obvious deficiency while still drifting toward weakness. And this is where protein becomes so important for the long-term future of the body. If you do not regularly send the body enough amino acids, and if you do not challenge muscle with resistance, the body reads that as disuse. It becomes more willing to downsize tissue that is expensive to maintain. That may sound efficient in the short term. Over the span of decades, it is devastating. Because what you lose is not only size, you lose the engine that helps stabilize blood sugar after meals, you lose tissue that burns energy at rest, you lose the strength needed to move confidently, you lose shock absorbers that protect joints, you lose the biological reserve that helps you withstand surgery, infection, hospitalization, and injury. This reserve concept is one of the most underrated ideas in all of medicine. Most people only think about health when they are sick, but the body is always either building reserve or spending reserve. Muscle is part of that reserve. Adequate protein helps maintain it. Strength training helps signal the body to keep it. Walking, daily movement, and balance work help you use it. When the reserve is high, setbacks are setbacks. When the reserve is low, setbacks can become turning points. Think about what people are actually afraid of when they say they want to age well. They are not usually talking about living a few extra months on paper. They are talking about staying capable, staying useful, staying clear, staying self-sufficient, being able to travel, lift a grandchild, catch themselves if they trip, recover after the flu, get through surgery, stay in their own home, cook their own meals, get up from a low chair without bracing through both arms. These are muscle-dependent outcomes. They are protein-dependent outcomes. They are training-dependent outcomes. They are not vanity metrics. They are freedom metrics. Now let us talk about appetite, because this is where the story becomes even more surprising. A lot of people blame themselves for always feeling hungry, for overeating, for craving snacks shortly after a meal, for never really feeling satisfied. But biology may explain more of that than most people realize. Researchers David Raubenheimer and Stephen Simpson developed what is known as the protein leverage hypothesis. In simple terms, it suggests that the body has a powerful drive to obtain enough protein, and when the diet is diluted with foods that are low in protein relative to calories, the body may keep driving intake in an attempt to reach that protein target. Think about the modern food environment. Highly processed foods are often engineered to be easy to chew, easy to overeat, and intensely rewarding. They can be rich in refined starch, sugar, fat, salt, and flavor chemistry, while being comparatively poor in protein and fiber. They are not always physically large, but they are often calorie-dense and biologically unsatisfying. You can eat a lot of them and still feel as if something is missing. Mayo Clinic's Dr. Donald Hensrud has explained satiety in simple terms. Proteins and fats are processed more slowly than carbohydrates, and foods processed more slowly can keep us full longer. That does not mean carbs are bad or that fat should be demonized. It means meal composition matters. If breakfast is mostly sugar and starch, hunger can come roaring back long before the day is over. This is why a low-protein eating pattern can create a vicious cycle. You eat foods that are easy to overconsume and weak at producing lasting fullness. Your hunger returns quickly. Energy crashes. Cravings increase. Snacking becomes more tempting. Blood sugar becomes less stable. Total calorie intake climbs. Yet even with all those calories, the body can still remain undersupported where it matters most. Overfed on energy, underfed on structure. That is one of the reasons protein deserves far more attention in preventive medicine than it gets. There is another layer to this that people do not hear enough about. Protein is crucial during weight loss. When people try to lose weight by simply eating less without protecting protein intake and strength training, the body does not only lose fat, it can lose muscle too. That is a terrible trade. If you become lighter but weaker, you may look better on a scale while becoming less resilient in real life. The ideal is not just to be smaller. The ideal is to become metabolically healthier while preserving or even improving lean tissue and function. That is why many physicians, obesity specialists, and aging researchers now emphasize body composition and strength, not just body weight. That brings us to one of the most powerful reframes in this entire conversation. Protein is not just about adding years to life. It is about adding life to years. It is about the trajectory of your next 2, 3, or 4 decades. The meal you eat today does not determine your future by itself. But the pattern does. If you eat too little protein for 10 years, that matters. If you lift nothing challenging for 10 years, that matters. If you repeatedly lose weight by sacrificing muscle, that matters. If breakfast is mostly low-protein processed food for 15 years, that matters. The body keeps score quietly. So, what does better look like in practice? First, you stop treating protein like an afterthought. Instead of asking, where can I squeeze it in? You start asking, what is my protein source in this meal? That one question changes everything. Breakfast stops being a blood sugar roller coaster and becomes a foundation. Lunch stops being random convenience food and becomes a real feeding opportunity. Dinner stops carrying the impossible burden of making up for a weak morning and afternoon. The National Institute on Aging advises older adults to get enough protein throughout the day by adding foods such as seafood, dairy, fortified soy products, beans, peas, and lentils to meals. Harvard Health also recommends spreading protein intake across the day instead of loading almost all of it into a single evening meal. Emerging research suggests people who distribute protein across breakfast, lunch, and dinner may preserve muscle strength better than those who eat most of it late in the day, though more research is still needed. The practical message is simple. Consistent protein feeding across the day appears smarter than waiting until night. This is where breakfast becomes incredibly important. Donald Layman and other protein researchers have long argued that many adults start the day in a protein-poor pattern and then wonder why hunger, snacking, and low energy follow them. Compare 2 mornings. In one, breakfast is sweet cereal, toast, juice, maybe a pastry, fast, familiar, low in protein, and easy to digest. In the other, breakfast includes eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, tofu, smoked salmon, or a protein-rich smoothie built around real food. The second breakfast sends a completely different signal. More fullness, more stability, more amino acids available early in the day. A better chance of actually meeting total protein goals without cramming them in at night. Animal source proteins such as fish, eggs, dairy, poultry, and meat are often efficient because they deliver all essential amino acids in a highly bioavailable form. That does not make plant proteins useless. Not even close. Beans, lentils, soy foods, peas, nuts, seeds, and whole grains can all contribute meaningfully. But plant-forward eaters often need a bit more planning to make sure total protein intake and essential amino acid quality are strong enough. The solution is not fear. The solution is design. Build meals around real protein sources instead of assuming they will magically add up. Another important concept is protein quality for muscle building. Scientists pay attention to essential amino acids, especially leucine, because leucine helps trigger muscle protein synthesis. Older adults may need a stronger leucine signal than younger adults due to anabolic resistance. That is one reason protein-rich foods such as dairy, eggs, fish, poultry, soy, and legumes can be useful anchors, and why mixed meals with a meaningful protein dose often outperform meals that just happen to contain a small incidental amount. In plain English, a sprinkle of protein is not the same as a true protein feeding. How much protein can the body use at a meal? This is where oversimplified internet advice creates confusion. The body will digest and absorb the protein you eat. The more precise question is, how much from a meal most strongly stimulates muscle protein synthesis at one time? Research suggests there is a practical sweet spot, and it varies with age, body size, training status, and the rest of the meal. Many experts land around roughly 25 to 40 grams per meal for many adults, with older adults often benefiting from the higher end because their muscles are less responsive. The exact number matters less than the principle. Do not make every meal tiny in protein and hope the total works out. This also explains why protein and resistance training are inseparable in the real world. Protein gives the body raw material. Resistance training gives the body a reason to use that material to preserve and rebuild muscle. Without training, high protein alone is a weaker signal. Without adequate protein, training is like trying to renovate a house without enough bricks. The combination is where the magic happens. The National Institute on Aging has spent decades highlighting the power of strength training for older adults. Their message is remarkably hopeful. Even later in life, people can improve muscle strength, mobility, and independence. UCLA Health notes that resistance training supports bone mineral density, muscle function, and even lower mortality risk. Strength training is not reserved for athletes or the young. It is one of the most direct ways to communicate to the body. Keep this tissue. Invest here. Do not downsize this person's capacity. And the effects go beyond muscle. Resistance training improves insulin sensitivity, which helps the body handle glucose more effectively. It supports bone health, which matters enormously for fracture prevention. It improves balance and gait when done appropriately. It can elevate mood, support cognition, and help protect against the downward spiral of inactivity. In other words, when you strengthen muscle, you are not just training a body part, you are upgrading a system. If that sounds too idealistic, think about the opposite scenario. A person eats little protein, loses muscle during middle age, becomes less active because movement feels harder, accumulates more body fat, becomes more insulin resistant, gets more fatigued, sleeps worse, gains more weight, avoids stairs, becomes less stable, falls more easily, and then starts needing more medical intervention for problems that all feed each other. That is not bad luck. That is biology under poor management. The body adapts to the signals it receives. Weak signal in, weak future out. This is also why grip strength has become such a fascinating biomarker in research. Study after study has linked weaker grip strength with higher risks of disability, chronic disease, and earlier mortality. Grip strength is not magical, but it is a window into whole body robustness. It reflects the broader truth that strength is health currency. You can have a normal body weight and still be physically underpowered. You can have normal lab values today and still be eroding your reserve underneath. Strength reveals things that standard checkups often miss. So how should you think about your own intake? A practical starting point is to estimate whether each meal contains a real protein anchor. Not a garnish, not a token spoonful, a real anchor. For breakfast, that might be eggs, Greek yogurt, skyr, cottage cheese, tofu scramble, a protein-rich smoothie, or leftovers with a deliberate protein source. For lunch, it could be salmon, chicken, tuna, tempeh, lentils, edamame, or a hearty bean-based meal paired with another protein. For dinner, it means the same principle, not just a mountain of starch with a tiny side of protein. Snacks can help too. Yogurt, milk, kefir, roasted edamame, cheese, boiled eggs, nuts paired with another protein source, or a thoughtfully chosen shake when whole food is not practical. For people trying to build or preserve muscle, lose body fat without becoming weak, or recover from illness or surgery, the conversation becomes even more important. In those cases, working with a physician or registered dietitian can be incredibly valuable. Protein needs are not one size fits all, but what is increasingly clear in the literature is that many adults, especially older adults, do not benefit from drifting through the day on chronically low intake. There is also a psychological advantage to protein-rich meals that often gets overlooked. When a meal has enough protein, people often feel more in control afterward. Fewer cravings, less grazing, better steadiness. That does not happen because protein has magical moral power. It happens because physiology is calmer. When people say, "I am just not disciplined," sometimes what they really mean is, "My meals are not setting me up to succeed." Good nutrition reduces the number of battles you have to fight with yourself. Now, I want to address a common fear. What if higher protein is bad for me? For healthy people, moderate increases within evidence-based ranges are generally well tolerated, especially when balanced inside an overall nutritious diet. But this is where nuance matters. People with chronic kidney disease, significant liver disease, rare metabolic disorders, or other medical complexities should personalize intake with their healthcare team. Health advice is strongest when it is both evidence-based and individualized. The point is not to force one number on everyone. The point is to stop pretending the minimum is always optimal. And remember, protein does not work in isolation. The best outcomes come from a full pattern. Resistance training, daily movement, sleep, adequate calories, fiber-rich whole foods, metabolic health, and consistency over time. If you eat more protein but stay sedentary, you leave benefits on the table. If you lift weights but consistently undereat protein, you also limit progress. If you focus on neither, the body moves in the direction that aging makes easiest, down. The hopeful part is that this process is modifiable. Not perfectly, not instantly, but meaningfully. The National Institute on Aging has stressed that even small changes matter and that any physical activity is better than none. Older adults can improve strength. Sedentary adults can start. Weak people can become less weak. Frail trajectories can often be slowed, sometimes dramatically. You are not powerless against biology, but biology does require your cooperation. So if you want a simple framework, remember this. First, protect muscle like it matters, because medically, it does. Second, make protein a deliberate part of every meal rather than an accidental side note. Third, spread intake across the day instead of relying on one heavy dinner. Fourth, combine protein with resistance training so the body has both the materials and the signal. Fifth, view strength as a form of insurance. The stronger and better nourished you are before stress arrives, the better your odds when stress does arrive. This is the deeper reason protein is so underrated. It hides in plain sight. It is not dramatic enough to make headlines every day. It does not feel like a miracle. It feels ordinary, but ordinary inputs repeated consistently for years are exactly what shape extraordinary outcomes in health. Protein helps determine whether the body keeps its engine or slowly strips it for parts. It helps determine whether appetite becomes easier to manage or harder. It helps determine whether weight loss leaves you stronger or weaker. It helps determine whether aging looks like slow collapse or durable capability. If you zoom out far enough, the entire conversation comes down to one question. What kind of body are you building for your future self? One that is fragile, underfed, and always one illness away from a steep decline, or one that has reserve, strength, metabolic flexibility, and a real chance to remain independent for as long as possible? The answer is not found in one superfood, one powder, or one perfect macro ratio. It is found in repeated respect for the body's actual design. Human beings need muscle. Muscle needs stimulus. Muscle repair needs protein. And the people who understand this early do not just look different. Very often they age differently. So when you hear the word protein, do not reduce it to gym culture. Think bigger, think medicine, think mobility, think appetite control, think recovery, think blood sugar, think fracture prevention, think surgical resilience, think immune support, think brain and body aging, think independence. Think about the version of you who will one day need every ounce of reserve you either built or failed to build. Because one day health stops being abstract. One day it becomes the strength in your legs when you stand up, the steadiness in your hands when you carry something heavy, the balance in your body when you slip, the stamina in your lungs when you walk uphill, and the speed of your recovery after illness. the confidence to live without fear inside your own home. That future is not decided in one day. It is shaped meal by meal, year by year, decade by decade. And one of the most powerful, evidence-backed, and still underappreciated tools you have to shape it is enough high-quality protein used wisely, supported by strength training, and repeated consistently long before you desperately need it. That is why protein is not just underrated in medicine. It may be one of the most medically important things people routinely ignore until the consequences are already showing. And if there is one final truth I want to leave with you, it is this. Frailty is not an inevitable identity, and in many cases, it is a long nutritional and physical drift. And drifts can be corrected. Start protecting your muscle. Start feeding your body what it needs. Start building the reserve your future depends on, because the goal is not merely to stay alive. The goal is to stay capable, and it is never too late to begin now.